Okay, it says I'm live. Says I'm live. So let me. So I want to do work for the dole. UN and human rights. Oh, shut up. Oh, this is the one I wanted to read. Look at that. Modern slavery in Australia. Why the fuck? Oh, here we go. Anyway, let's go and read this one. The law field as a work for the dole version 2.0. This is 2018. Let's go. The purpose of this paper is to analyze the legality of the government's abuse of the rights of the unemployed within Australia. No particularly difficult legal ideas are introduced, relying for the most part on an understanding of liberty, legality, virus, and the limits of delegated authority that should be accessible to anyone who has a basic understanding of administrative and constitutional law. The general strategy taken is first to establish that individual liberty is a fundamental right and ascertain that it has been abused. Following this, we will test whether the government's implementation of work for the dole has followed the required processes and procedures demanded of any rights abusive action of government, in particular the clear statement principle and the Legislation Act 2003 will be drawn upon here. 4 arguments are advanced to challenge the legality of the implementation. 1. That the process is a punishment that is intended to deter people from unemployment. It violates Chapter 3 of the Constitution, separation of powers. That the implementation does not match the legislation and as such is ultra-virus. That there does not exist sufficient detail regarding the clear statement principle to define the implementation. That the demands of the Legislation Act 2003 have not been followed. This is the United Kingdom's workfare scheme implemented under far more rigorous and demanding legislation will be examined to understand how it failed upon challenge. The community development program that attempted and failed to impose legislation closer in wording to the more assertive UK legislation will be investigated, and the question raised of whether in attempting to expand their powers the executive knew that they were acting unlawfully. The civil and criminal crimes of misfeasance will be investigated. Okay. The case against the government's imposition of punitive and coercive welfare policies consists of 4 independent challenges that speak against the abuse of the fundamental common law right to individual liberty. All right. The first challenge is that the implementation of the Social Security Act is a punitive policy intended to deter people from unemployment, and that to do so it relies upon the imposition of extrajudicial punishment. Extrajudicial punishment. That is a very good idea there. Let me highlight that. That is a... There you go. Following the argument from Al-Khattab, we know that Chapter 3 is always infringed where the detention of a person other than by a curial order, whatever the purpose of the detention, is authorized by a law of the Commonwealth and imposes punishment, leaving us with the question of whether work for the dole is a punishment. We have evidence from Senate estimates hearings that imply work for the dole is intended to deter unemployment. I consider work for the dole punishment. Of course I do. Whether an abuse of rights imposed by law with the objective of deterring a behavior is a punishment is for the court to decide. If it is then, as it is impossible for lawful legislation under Chapter 3 to intend such the implementation must be ultra vires. I don't know what that means. Of course, work for the dole is punishment. Who the hell doesn't? It's like a community service order. It's a punishment. The second challenge is one of statutory interpretation in the sense that the implementation of Social Security is inconsistent with its definition. Yeah, negotiated, right? Fucking bullshit. All things that may not be done, in which any activities may be included within these plans by negotiation other than nothing specifically disallowed. Limitation is the opposite, allowing nothing other than those things specifically allowed by the Secretary. One is a logical complement of the hands. I don't know what that toy challenge is. Wait a minute, what? Such instruments are unenforceable if not registered under no instruments that define the detail okay. So let's go to background. Under current Australian social security law, unemployed people seeking New Start allowance are submitted to a punitive and coercive regime known as work for the dole. This imposes upon welfare recipients obligations see, effectively equivalent to community service orders demanded of convicted criminals. This includes an intensive compliance and reporting regime and the requirement to perform mandatory unpaid labor under pain of penalty. See? It's a punitive, coercive, it's what convicted criminals are even given the same thing. Fucking shit. Proposed expansions of the program include drug testing and income management, both of which are invasions of privacy and restrictions on liberty. Oh, shit. The program, see, if you don't stop them now, they'll just keep on expanding and expanding and expanding this invasion. I mean, all unemployed up to retirement age to conditions not unlike parole. Long-term unemployed can reasonably expect to spend the remainder of their lives under the conditions of a community service order. The obligations imposed on welfare recipients in many cases exceed the maximum penalty that can be imposed by the New South Wales courts for criminal offences. Recipients aged under 30 are required to perform 26 weeks of 25 hours per week unpaid labor. How can this be happening? This equates to 650 hours, 150 hours more than the maximum 500 hours a New South Wales court can impose with those sentenced for crimes that have a maximum term of imprisonment that exceeds 1 year. New Start recipients are required to perform this every year, as well as other activities that may be demanded of them by the Secretary. The 25-hour a week demand will be expanded to all recipients under 50 from 2018. Currently, those aged 30 to 50 have a 15-hour a week requirement. The rights abusive nature of the policy is intentional and exists within the context of an international social policy known as workfare that unashamedly aims to make life as unpleasant as possible for welfare recipients with the objective of herding them towards employment. Oh, how cruel! Cruel! This is cruel and unusual punishment. Whether government should do this, or whether in an unsaturated labor market this amounts to whipping a cowering cur in a corner, is a question of merits. Merits is the function of the legislature, not the judiciary rendering any argument on merits ground. Okay. you know how you fight back? You have to fight back by doing sit-ins. You have to protest against this. Yeah. When consequences of policy abuse fundamental rights, as is a necessary consequence of any coercive or punitive mechanism, then the law not only should come into play, but as consequence of the demands of legality must come. Vigorously challenge the current statement on necessary education of the noble expression will See, this question of legality, I was reading another thing about legality. Legality also has to do with whether Parliament can enact laws that are like, whether there's a question of whether there's an abuse of power kind of thing. Alright, so that's one way to, I guess, challenge it. Register of legislation. Register of legislation. Look, this duty is all the more important when the abuse is applied to those who, by the very definition of their circumstances, lack the resources and in many cases the capability to oppose them, the unemployed. To have fundamental common law rights of even a single individual abused by executive order is odious and demanding of challenge. See, this is why I want to challenge this bullshit. To have the rights of hundreds of thousands of the country's poorest and most vulnerable people abused at a time with millions impacted over the decades the policy has been in place unchallenged is beyond comprehension. You mean no one challenged this? But I heard that someone did challenge the work for the dole at the UN Human Rights Commission, but that was on Article 8 of the ICC, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and apparently the UN Human Rights Commission said it was not. But this UN Human Rights is a political bullshit. So maybe some Australian government people went there and said, "Hey, you don't say anything bad about this." But what is this statement? Unchallenged. You mean he's saying this has never been unchallenged? Established limited if you're unable to demand of the executive and the rights they have no legal conditions that exist within. Okay. Right, that the executive is not a necessary ingredient to act. Huh. So in the United Kingdom, they wanting of detail and as a consequence unlawful. Wait a minute. Investigate the community development program. These people are just sick. The people in parliament. I feel like Australia is a right-wing country. I'm seriously like thinking like, I was thinking like maybe I want to go to some other country, like a socialist country, maybe Canada or New Zealand. I was looking into Denmark, but Denmark like they have all these burdens on becoming a citizen where you have to like not rely on unemployed benefits for so many years or something. I'm like, forget that. No, maybe like New Zealand might be better. Maybe I'll go to New Zealand. Maybe I don't know. I'm sick and tired of this country. This country is so like right wing. I'm telling you. Sorry. Finalize the discussion, draw conclusions. Huh. Oh, so there you go. This community development program legislation. So what he's saying is the work for the dole scheme, the mutual obligation scheme, it is currently being used. However, because the scheme has to be on this thing called register of legislation, and because it has a punitive character, and maybe that's a way to invalidate it. Unlike our cousins in the United States, who have statutes devoted to her, liberty in Australia is an elusive spirit. She lacks the substance, definition, and status deserving of that singular ideal that distinguishes our law and our society from that of all others. Rather than quoted, casually acknowledged by the court as, quote, personal liberty is, quote, the most elementary and important of all common law rights. And the definition to find this, we need to go back to elections, the rights of everyone on the option, the rights of individuals. These words are those. Well, I'm tempted to simply. This is too important to assume. This is too important to assume. Okay. Blackstone's laws. Let's talk about personal liberty. The absolute rights of man, considered as a free agent, man, woman, endowed with discernment to know good from evil and with power of choosing those measures which appear to him to be most desirable, are usually summed up in one general appellation and denominated the natural liberty of mankind. This natural liberty consists properly in a power of acting as one thinks fit, without any restraint or control, unless by the law of nature, being a right inherent in us by birth, and one of the gifts of God to man at his creation, when he endued him with the faculty of free will. Political, therefore, or civil liberty, which is that of a member of society, is no other than natural liberty, so far restrained by human laws. And not farther, as is necessary and expedient for the general advantage of the public. So is the imposition. Hence, we may collect that the law which restrains a man from doing mischief to his fellow citizens by being unemployed does not the state of being unemployed causes harm to no one. If you're unemployed, are you a criminal? Like, criminals commit crimes. They positively do something or not do something and allow the commission of a crime. But is the state of being unemployed, is that in itself a crime? Is it like is being unemployed do mischief to his or her fellow citizens? So it diminishes the natural, increases the civil liberty of mankind. But every wanton and causeless restraint of the will to the subject, whether practiced by a monarch, a nobility, or a popular assembly, parliament, is a degree to tyranny. So that laws, when prudently framed, are by no means subversive, but rather introductive of liberty. For as Mr. Locke has well observed, where there is no law, there is no freedom. But then, on the other hand, that constitution or frame of government, that system of laws, is alone calculated to maintain civil liberty, which leaves the subject entire master of his own conduct, except in those points wherein the public good requires some direction or restraint. They flourish in their highest vigor in these kingdoms where it falls little short of perfection and can only be lost or destroyed by the folly and can only be lost or destroyed by the folly or demerits of its owner, the legislature. Without life and liberty, we cannot enjoy our liberty. Without liberty, we cannot enjoy our liberty. And of taught that exists within the spectrum of roads. It has a limited in any case. Let us see no reason to do this. So he's framing his this is framing his individual liberty. Personal liberty of individuals. Power of locomotion, of changing situation, of bringing one's person to whatsoever place one's own inclination may direct, without imprisonment or restraint, unless by due course of law. A great person of public is necessary, for if once it were left in the power of any as in France is daily practiced by the crown, there would soon be an end of all other rights. There would soon be an end of all other rights and immunities. Right of the person in any wise. I don't understand. Okay, but anyway. What this thing called liberty that Blackstein describes, acting as agency. Okay, so agency is liberty. Choosing those measures which appear to him to be most desirable. Yeah, so for instance, this mutual obligation. If I want money from the government, and the only way to get money because I'm unemployed is to enter into this contract with the government. And I'm poor and I have no other choice, then obviously that is not freedom. The freedom exists when you have the freedom to say no. But if I say no to the contract, if I'm unemployed, the consequence of saying no is destitution, poverty. So that's not true freedom. Okay, yeah. It's having choice. So basically, liberty is to have choice, to have agency. Yeah, it's like you have the capacity to choose how you want to live your life. Liberty. Restrains choice as. More than to that was law that favored of oppression. Okay. We need choice and action. We need to revert to constraint. We need to recognize that lawful constraint is necessary. We need to recognize that lawful constraint is necessary to protect other people's rights. Okay. Liberty exists as the ability to be able to choose for oneself and to be able to act in accordance with one's own choices, free of unlawful coercion or constraint imposed upon either choice or action, to be able to meet the demands of one's own circumstances, one's own desires in accordance with one's own will, subject to no imposition other than that least lawful restriction necessary to ensure the sanctity of the rights of others. So there you go. If I'm being unemployed, why should I be punished? If I'm being unemployed and I need the state has Australia is a party to various treaties. the right to social security. This is from the Australian Government Attorney General's Department. And this is for International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. There is also another one, right to Social Security. Right to freedom from slavery and forced labor. Here's where they say this. They include sex work in there as well. Oh yeah, alright. Oh yeah, for the forced labor. Alright, okay. Sweatshop labor. Yeah, okay. Here's where they say this. Okay, forced labor. Article 8.3c provides that certain types of work or services do not constitute forced labor, namely labor performed pursuant to a sentence of imprisonment imposed by a court, service of a military character, or service required of conscientious objectors, service required in time of emergency, or work or service under normal civil obligations. The last mentioned category would include jury service. In the case involving Australia, the UN Human Rights Committee stated that work required under the Work for the Dole scheme did not constitute forced labor under Article 8. This is what I'm saying. I bet this case was decided Human Rights Committee, whatever. See, ICLO. Yeah, here is the ILO Convention on Abolition of Forced Labor. But the UN, anyway, let's go to this stupid thing. Oh, we already know that. You know what? I should write a complaint to the International Labor Organization that the work for the dole infringe is a form of forced labor. I mean, I could try. I didn't actually think about that. Yeah, I should think about that. I mean, like this person said, no, this is written in 2018. It's only like, what, 2 years ago, less than two years ago, so. I think now you can understand why a lot of people don't like what the government is doing. This is horrible. That's horrible. Anyway, I think I'll end my stream now, and yeah, this is something I definitely want to pursue. People have to fight back. People have to fight back.